that allow them to fly. Flight is obviously important to most birds, not all birds, but most. And so one of those adaptations has to do with their bone structure. If you were to pick up a bird, a large bird, for example, you would, when you felt them, you would find that they actually feel much lighter than you would expect an animal of that size to be. And one of the reasons is because of their bone structure. Birds have hollow bones, okay, that are very lightweight, because again, you need to be fairly lightweight in order to make flight efficient. And so they're not 100% hollow, but they have sort of a network of bone tissue that's very thin, but that reinforces the bone. Okay, you can see this is an actual bone. You can see these fibers of bone tissue make the bone strong, but still lightweight. Whereas the bones of a mammal or other animals are much more solid. As just told me a minute ago when we talked about similarities between birds and reptiles, their fertilization is what? Internal. The male bird deposits sperm into the female bird's reproductive tract where it fertilizes the egg cell. Then that egg grows and develops. Shell forms, and the bird lays the egg, which develops externally. Bird's body temperature, what do you think? They're warm-blooded. Are there any birds that you know of that may give you a clue as to that? How would you know birds are warm-blooded?
Penguin.
Yeah, if you think about like a penguin, for example, living in extreme Arctic conditions, they are able to be active even under those cold conditions because they're warm-blooded, because they're maintaining a constant body temperature, a high body temperature compared to the surroundings. So yes, they're warm-blooded. Birds can live in a variety of habitats, a wider variety than most cold-blooded animals. But the downside of that is what?
You need more energy.
They need more food. They need a lot more food to support keeping that elevated body temperature. For circulation, birds have a four-chambered heart, a full four-chambered heart. And we're going to talk a lot about the heart when we get to human body systems, but the benefit of a four-chambered heart is oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood are kept completely separate. Okay? Deoxygenated blood from all the body parts comes in, okay, to the right atrium, moves into the right ventricle, and then gets pumped to where? Where does this blood need to go?
To the arteries.
No, to the lungs. Because it's coming from all the body cells, what's that blood like?
Deoxygenated.
Deoxygenated. It's filled with carbon dioxide. It makes its way to the lungs, gets new oxygen, gets rid of that carbon dioxide, and then when it returns to the heart, comes back to the other side. Okay, it comes into the left side of the heart. Left atrium, left ventricle, and then when it gets pumped out, where is this blood going?
Through your veins.
All of the body parts, through arteries, but through all the body parts, to the brain and the wings and all those parts. Okay, so the blood's kept completely separate. Oxygenated, deoxygenated blood, making a more efficient way of getting oxygen to the cells. There's no mixing at all. Gets the maximum amount of oxygen to all of the body cells. Okay, birds have external development inside of eggs, and the eggs of birds are different from reptile eggs, that they have a hard, sort of brittle, waterproof shell. And that shell is permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide as well. We're going to talk a lot about the parts of an egg, and there are parts that allow for the exchange of gases between the outside and inside of the egg. Those eggs also need to be kept at the proper temperature. That's what incubating an egg is. Okay? Without the proper amount of heat and moisture, the egg won't develop. The embryo inside of the egg doesn't grow. Carmen?
So what if like it's born and then you don't incubate it for a while, but then you do, would then it start
It
growing?
depends on how much time there's left. There can be a gap, and then the incubation can start, and then the young can start to develop. But if it's too long, then they won't.
They just die?
Excuse me?
They just die?
Yeah. Now birds, as you know, many birds migrate. Some birds don't. Some do. So around our area, obviously, most birds have migrated. Why?
Because it's cold.
Yeah, but they can maintain an internal body temperature, so they're not as affected by that cold. Go on? Yeah, because there's an absence of food right now. Around here, birds that eat insects, they're out of luck. There's not a whole lot to find. Okay? So often that migration, in our area it's usually to the south, is to generally provide food for the bird because food is scarce in certain areas. Some birds migrate thousands and thousands of miles, some migrate less, some don't migrate at all. Another unique adaptation of birds is feathers as a body covering. Feathers actually serve several purposes. What do feathers do for a bird? What's one possible thing? What's the most? Okay, one is for insulation. Okay, feathers keep a bird warm. And there's actually different types of feathers. I know when you think feather, you think of like a feather you find on the ground with the rachis, and that's the bottom part that goes into the bird's skin, and then a nice feather. That's a flight feather you're thinking of. Okay, that's used for flight. But other feathers are used for insulation. What do you call? Anyone know what those feathers are called? I know you've heard the word. You may have a jacket or a pillow or a comforter that's insulated using bird feathers. What are they called? Do you know? Sometimes a little feather might come out of your pillow and poke you. Pull it out and it's kind of all, you know what they're called? Down. Down pillow, the down jacket. And the down feathers are used for insulation, and they work very well to insulate because they trap air. That's how insulation works, by trapping air, preventing heat from escaping. They're also used as camouflage or to attract mates, depending on the type of bird and species.
Like a peacock.
Like a peacock. Like, you ever seen Bird of Paradise?
No.
So these long tail feathers are sort of drooping off of them, kind of neat.
Woo the ladies.
All right, now this is a famous bird fossil called Archaeopteryx. So what do we know today? That where did birds evolve from?
Pterodactyls.
No. What? Yeah, dinosaur-like creature from reptiles. Okay, birds or reptiles evolved from reptiles. Archaeopteryx, the name itself means ancient bird, is a fossil that helps scientists make this connection. Archaeopteryx was a fossilized bird-like creature that was preserved in very, very fine sediment. So you could see a lot of detail about this
Triceratops.
this organism. It's about the size of a crow, and it showed a link between reptiles and birds because some of its features were bird-like and some were reptile-like.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's an actual picture of Archaeopteryx. So it had feathers, it had wings, and even the detail of the feathers was preserved in this fossil. You can see that. So it had feathers and wings, okay? But it also had claws on the wings, the ends of the wings, okay? Which modern birds don't have, but reptiles do have in their forelimbs. Okay? It had teeth. Modern birds do not have teeth. No. They have beaks and bills, yeah, but no teeth in there. So this is another intermediate link between reptiles and birds. Had scales covering its head. It had a bony tail, okay, all of which are characteristics that are somewhat reptile-like, but also had several bird-like characteristics. So this, again, showed the link between the two. That's what an artist think Archaeopteryx may have looked like, something along those lines.
God,
So again, reptile-like, but bird-like as well.
that's not
All right, let's talk about eggs. So when you go, anybody have eggs for breakfast this morning?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I really didn't have that.
All right. Well, if you crack an egg, first of all, the egg you buy at the grocery store, where did it come from?
A chicken.
A farm.
It's chicken. And so, if you take that egg out of the refrigerator and put it in the oven for a little while at low temperature and incubate it, will it hatch into a chick?
No.
Why not?
Because it's dead.
That'd be weird.
Not so much because it's dead.
Yellow and
Maybe because there's no moisture in the oven.
Okay, well, but something else. It's missing an important thing.
Because it's already dead. I mean.
No?
And what was the question?
Yeah,
Why
it's like-
will that not hatch into a chick?
Because
Egg
it was
is-
never
It
fertilized.
was never fertilized. So chicken eggs that you buy at the store are unfertilized eggs.
They are?
They are.
How do you get them?
So how do you get them? You buy them. But how do they ensure that they're not fertilized?
How did
They don't
chickens
find
get
it.
fertilized?
They don't get any roosters.
Yes, they keep the rooster. There's no rooster involved. A rooster is a male chicken. A hen is a female chicken. Obviously, if there are no roosters around, they cannot fertilize any of those hen's eggs, and so they're not fertilized. They could never grow into a baby chick because they're not fertilized. That's the first step.
How do you?
Chickens will continue, hens will continue to lay eggs even if they're unfertilized. So they'll lay eggs even if they were never
A
fertilized.
waste of eggs.
And so, although I have heard this, that hens will lay more eggs if there is a rooster in the vicinity. Obviously,
So keep them in
you want
a
to,
cage.
there's a saying, keep the rooster out of the hen house. And again, that's a saying that
But the
it's
rooster
about not allowing rooster to fertilize those eggs. So it's not fertilized, but it has parts inside of it that are all useful if it were fertilized. We're going to talk about some of those parts. And so you've seen all these things if you ever cracked an egg and looked at it, but you may not have really thought about what the parts are. So start with the shell of the egg. Obviously is on the outside. These eggs are made of mainly of calcium. Okay, that's the first layer. Beneath the shell is a very thin membrane called the shell membrane. Now this over break, my daughter wanted egg salad for lunch, so I boiled the eggs and everything. But when I was peeling the eggs, like that membrane wasn't coming off. It's very, very thin. Sometimes it sticks to the egg white. Those kind of things.
I thought you were a vegetarian.
I am.
It's not
Killing a
vegan.
bird.
So this is the yolk. We'll talk about the function of these things in a minute. The egg white, which actually is clear when it's not cooked, or yellowish clear,
Yeah.
that's called albumin, is the scientific name for that.
start calling it that.
Yolk membrane.
Around the yolk, you know, that if you're making like eggs over easy and you don't want the yolk to be broken, you're trying not to rupture that yolk membrane. It keeps the yolk in one place.
Yeah, and you always try to peel it off so you
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Attached to the yolk are some protein stringy structures called the chelae.
I've never seen that before.
You've seen it. When we look at eggs next week, I'll point it out, but you've seen it, I'm sure. They're little white attached to the yolk.
Oh, no. Can we look at?
At one end of the egg is an air space. If you make a hard-boiled egg and then you peel it, that's the end that has like a little indentation. It's in the larger end, the wider end of the egg is the air space. If you crack a raw egg and look inside, one end there'll be like a little bubble in the end of the egg. That's the air space. And then you may not have ever noticed it, but on the yolk there's a tiny white spot called the blastoderm. So those are the parts of an unfertilized egg. So let's talk a little bit about what they do. The shell is made of calcium, and actually, when it's fertilized, as the embryo is growing inside of the egg, it will utilize some of the calcium from the shell to build up its skeleton. The next layer down, the shell membrane provides a barrier to prevent bacteria from getting into where the embryo is growing. The air space, that little bubble of air that's in the wide end, it does a couple things. First, it acts sort of as a shock absorber. So as that egg gets rolled around, moved around, it absorbs some of that. But also, it's going to provide the first breath for a chick as it hatches. When a chick is about to hatch from its shell, it pokes its beak into the airspace and uses that as its first breath, and then starts working its way out of the egg after that. Donovan?
How do things in eggs like get nutrients? 'Cause we have like an umbilical cord, but they don't.
Good question. The yolk provides all of the nutrients that developing embryo needs and is going to use as it grows. So it's made, the yolk is made mainly of fat, which, as you know, provides a lot of calories, a lot of energy, but also vitamins and minerals. It's also why sometimes people are trying to eat a healthier breakfast or something. Say like an egg white omelet or just egg whites, because the egg whites are made of protein. All the fat in an egg is in the yolk. So it provides fats, vitamins, minerals, and so on. The yolk membrane encloses the yolk and basically holds it together. And then those things that you said you've never seen before, those chelae, those little stringy white things attached to the yolk, they kind of suspend it in place so it doesn't like sink to one side of the egg or the other. They're like sort of these ropes of protein that stretch from one side of the egg to the other, holding the yolk in place.
Wait, has it ever happened that someone bought eggs and then chicken? No.
Not that I've ever heard of, no. They are inspected too, you know, it used to be called candling an egg, where they would hold up an egg. You know, this is sort of when it was individual farmers growing eggs and they had lots of chickens and roosters around and they wanted to be sure. You could hold it up to a candle, you could see through it, you could sort of see the outline and be sure there's no embryo inside of there. But people do eat fertilized chicken eggs as well, or duck
That's
eggs.
weird.
Yeah, I remember
That'd be a great prank.
my uncle, he pranked me, right? I was 4 years old. He was like, bro, do you want an egg? And I was like, yes. And then he started boiling his egg. He opened his first. it was all cooked and everything. When he gave me his, there was a chicken side. I started chewing it, and I see blood in my tooth. And I was like, is my tooth bleeding? And then I was like, oh my god, it's an live chicken.
Yeah, it's called balut, B-A-L-U-T. It's a common food. You know, if you don't eat chicken, why not eat those? Same
Yeah,
thing.
but it tasted raw because there was blood in it still.
Oh yeah. All right. Albumin is egg white. Just another word for egg white. That provides much of the protein that the embryo needs to develop.
I see you were using texting terms.
I cook.
And then the blastoderm. The blastoderm is, again, that small white spot on the yolk. That's the actual area where a sperm cell would enter to fertilize the egg. That's what would grow into an embryo if it had been fertilized, that tiny little spot on the yolk. So a lot of people think that the yolk is where the embryo would be, but it's not. It's this little spot on the yolk that could grow into an embryo if it had been fertilized.
So we're eating a baby.
And that's where that cell, that blastoderm, if it were fertilized, would start to divide from one cell into 2 and 4 and 8 and so forth, and start to grow into the embryo. Okay, let's say it does get fertilized. And once an egg is fertilized, things start to change. Okay? And things start to look a little bit different because the embryo starts to form. So here we have the embryo, the little baby chick. And it starts to develop from that blastoderm. Then there's some other parts. The embryo is surrounded in a little membrane. Okay? Well, the yolk is still here. The albumin is still here. Then there's this allantois. The allantois is a membrane, talk about, that's used for gas exchange and waste. And then the little bubble surrounding the embryo is called the amnion. The embryo is a developing chick. The allantois is the waste sac. So as this embryo grows, it produces some waste that will be released through this allantois. It's also how it gets oxygen in. Then the amnion is sort of a shock absorber, a little bubble around the embryo to protect it as it grows. Okay, if we look a little bit later on, now it's a little larger. Yeah, see the little chick embryo? It's getting a little bigger.
Huh? I don't see it.
It's the eye right here. Its head, its back, its limbs.
The eyes like a
Boy!
What's the head so big?
It's one of the first things that the head goes first. Surrounded by, again, this amnion, this bubble. We have the yolk membrane here, but you could see that in the yolk, what do you think these are? They're vessels. They're vessels that are going to bring nutrients from the yolk into the chick. The allantois, again, is up there. And the allantic vessels are what transport oxygen and waste. So those vessels are used for taking oxygen in and getting rid of carbon dioxide. The yolk vessels are used for getting nutrients into the chick embryo. And what will happen as the embryo grows? What happens to the size of the yolk?
Gets bigger.
Shrinks. Why does it shrink? Yeah, because those nutrients are being used up. As it shrinks, what happens to the embryo? it gets larger. It's utilizing that energy to grow. As you see, it's about 21 days or so, about 3 weeks for a chicken egg to go from being laid to hatching. Again, you see the embryo goes from to larger, so it's basically towards the end of its growth and development. It's just the embryo in there, just the baby chick takes up all the space. It's used up all of the yolk, it's used up the albumin, and it's just about ready to hatch.
Yeah,
Flexible.
Wow, imagine being like that.
Oh, so yeah, Baloo. Baloo is fertilized. No, this is just so for your information. Fertilized duck or chicken eggs that are often served still in their shell. Okay.
Oh, but I ate it all
Okay.
bloody.
Yeah, so it's common snack in different parts of the world, and they can be served steamed,
Oh, that's gotta be good.
often with vinegar. Okay, soy sauce, and it's basically the whole embryo.
That's so mean.
Yeah, but when I ate it with blood. Not with.
Yeah, I mean that's all the parts are still in there, and you can buy them at the store and stuff.
That's gotta be good.
Yeah.
Are you serious? Who just said that?